Alrighty then, I got you. Let's go over Karl Marx's labor theory value. So labor theory value is made up of two words, labor and value. What is value under Marxism? Value is one, a measurement of the social relations amongst people. Two, value is something that receives a material form. It assumes a material form. This is a material girl. And then three, value is related to the process of production. Now, we all know what human labor is, but Karl Marx's labor theory value is based off of socially necessary labor time. This is the amount of time across an entire industry that it takes to make something, the average amount of time across an entire industry that it takes to make something. So these guys are all making hammers, and across the entire industry, it takes about an average of 2 hours to make a hammer, give or take. You know, it might take them 2.1 hours, 2.2 hours, but we can just average it out to 2 hours. So putting these two together, labor theory value just basically assumes and states that the average amount of time across an industry that it takes to make something is the determinant of its value. But what is made by this has to be a product that is actually needed or wanted by society. Labor theory value really is a simple concept. It just acknowledges that everything humans have ever used to create wealth requires, at the most basic form, human labor. Even the big industrial machines of today, like locomotives and AI robots, are still representations of human labor because there was human labor required to make these big industrial machines. Even machines that replace other workers still represent human labor because a person had to create these machines. There has never been a machine that can create another machine that can create another machine. And Marx distinguished between these two kinds of labor, the labor done by living humans as living labor, and the labor represented by humans accrued over time through industrial machines or through money as dead labor. LTV is also an old idea. Marx got it from thinkers like Adam Smith and David Ricardo, classical economists. He just expanded on the idea and made it his own. One good example of LTV is that if I made a shitty table in 15 minutes, it would cost a lot less than tables made by professional craftsmen, who usually took 2 hours to finish a table. The value of my table is being compared against the average time across the entire industry that's being used to make the table. And the table is something that people want. A common misunderstanding and argument against LTV is that simply just taking time to make a worthless thing means that you're adding value to it. Libertarians will say something like, oh, if I spend 200 hours making a mud cake, I'll have a $200 mud cake. No, as we've stated before, it's the socially necessary labor time is across an entire industry to make a product that's wanted by society. Nobody wants a fucking mud cake. Labor theory value doesn't just say that the more hours you put into making something shitty, the more it costs. The products still have to be desirable by society and are only measured against the average of the industry, of the entire industry, not your own individual time, isolated from everybody else. As Chris Harman stated, for this reason, Marx insisted that the measure of the value of something was not simply the time it took an individual to make it, but the time it would take an individual working with the average level of technology and the average level of skill he called the average level of labor needed, the socially necessary labor time. The point is important because under capitalism, advances in technology are always taking place, which means that it takes less and less labor to produce goods. Therefore, machines that help increase productivity means less socially necessary labor time used to make a product. Therefore, the value of the product goes lower. Less time to make something across an entire industry, less value. More time to make something across an entire industry, more value. Now, value is not the same as price. Many anti-Marxists will often say Marxists don't acknowledge supply and demand. Yes, we do. Value is something that underlies every single commodity. Value is always the base cost of a good. But price can fluctuate up and down with the market. But the average price will always tend to fluctuate around the underlying value. Price can go up, price can go down, but it's always trying to get as close to value as possible. And that value is determined by labor theory value. Think of buying a house in California. Houses here are always fluctuating up and down like crazy, and the housing prices are here are insane. But let's say the market says that the price of the house is around 1.2 million. So you pay 1.2 million for the house because we're in a seller's market. So the housing prices have gone up. Well, when you go to the bank for a loan, the bank only gives you a loan for $800,000. Why is that? Why do banks only give us loans way lower than what we paid for our mortgages? That's because banks know the true underlying value of the house. The free market makes our houses go crazy all over the place. Bam, 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 bam. But they're always generalizing towards the value, which the banks aren't going to give you a loan for more than the value of the house. Now, this is not a perfect example in real life. This is not how houses work exactly. Like California housing prices just keep on going up and up and up. But it's a good example. So don't regard this as an actual real world example. It's just something to get your head wrapped around it. Now, the basic formula of capital is MCM. Money, commodity, money. A capitalist has money. He uses that to get a worker to produce a commodity. He then sells that commodity and gets more money. In this exchange, the worker, through his labor power, creates value in the commodity. Let's say the capitalist applied the worker with a bunch of raw parts, and the worker made a big-ass gun, and he sells that gun at the market. The socially necessary labor time that it took the worker to make that big-ass gun and then the capitalist to sell it determines the value. Because of this relationship, capitalism is a competitive adventure, and living labor is used by capitalists to buy machines and hire more workers to exploit, and then to get more value. and then to buy more machines to hire more workers to exploit to get more value, in order to stay above the competition, which is also doing the same thing. In this way, capitalism becomes a monster with infinite growth in a finite world, constantly eating everything up. And since capitalism is competitive, as Chris Harman says, production does not take place to satisfy human need, even the human needs of the capitalist class, but in order to enable one capitalist to survive in competition with another capitalist. The workers employed by each capitalist find their lives dominated by the drive of their employers to accumulate faster than their rivals. Finally, value is a measure of all hidden social relations found within every commodity. When you go to Walmart and you look at a toy, you don't see just a toy. You see the men that pulled out the oil out of the earth in order to get the raw products, and the people in the sweatshop factories that assembled the plastic products, the truckers that drove those toy parts across the nation and across ocean lanes, and then the people who stocked the shelves. Value is a measurement of all these hidden human social relations hidden within a product. Value is an expression of social productions and relations amongst people. And our inability to see this is called commodity fetishism. Commodity fetishism is when we're unable to see all the exploitation that takes place in order to make our products. What capitalism hides from us is that we are all relying on each other as human beings on this earth, making things for each other and working for each other's lives. It hides that all behind the commodity fetish. Finally, it is important to mention that labor is not the only source of value. It is a very important source of value, but there are other sources of value such as nature, which naturally produces things. Labor is just a very important source of value, but it's not the only one. You need to mention that. Otherwise, the ghost of Marx will haunt you.